sister, woman, woman, sister. When you sister, when you woman, when you sister.
I am so absolutely happy to be here in Vancouver. First of all, you have a beautiful city. I just love it. But I also feel that you have a treasure here in the rape relief and women's services. It's just to be very appreciated, because I've been around the country, and believe me, there are rape crisis centers and there are rape crisis centers. And this one is just heads and shoulders above. Anyway, they're very wonderful. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our history, and then after I finish with that, I have some additional thoughts, and we'll just get started. Of course, Roe v. Wade is famous throughout the world, but of course this is applies to U.S. women only, but it had tremendous influence, around the globe. That permits abortion for women in the United States between, up to 6 months pregnancy. Of course, the law itself is between a woman and her doctor. It has not been interpreted that way, fortunately, but that is the way that Justice Blackmun put it out, which was far from what we who were campaigning for abortion on demand wanted. But of course, we were very happy with it. I'll talk more about that. As here, we campaigned for abortion rights, and I was, part of that group. I joined the women's movement. I was already a mother of 6 children, and in my 30s. So I was a bit older than most of the women that came forward to be part of the movement. And the way I was sitting at my office desk, I worked on a temp basis just to supplement my family income on a part-time basis. And I heard that these women were picketing at the White House. And I practically jumped out of my chair. I was so thrilled to hear this. And I, of course, looked up now and when was their next meeting, etc. And my husband drove me to the meeting, which was in the next few days. And, it was a very large meeting. About 300 women were in this large banquet hall at a restaurant nearby in downtown Los Angeles. And frankly, I was a little bit of a fish out of water because, here I was a homemaker, I was a housekeeper, housewife. And most of these women were in their business suits, and they were professionals. And I thought, well, what does my life have to do with the issues that they were studying, which was, the glass, well, they didn't call it the glass ceiling, but that was the ideas, the problems of professional women. And then they announced that they had an abortion committee. Well, I had an illegal abortion, so I certainly knew about that. So I joined, and there were 3 of us on the committee, and the person heading it up was Lana Clark Phelan, Phelan. And Lana, I was supremely lucky because Lana was a pioneer. She wrote a book along with Pat McGinnis called The Abortion Handbook. And so as a new person on the committee, I went around with Lana when she went to the speaking engagements in the community. And Lana was a very brilliant woman and had such a wealth of information, and she was very funny and, witty. And I took notes and so forth. So I got up to speed on the basic facts of abortion. And I joined the speakers committee and, also did presentations. Well, one of the other members, the other 3 members, the other member was Mary Petrinovich. And Mary lived in Riverside, and her husband was a professor there at the university. And every week she would bring in a few women from the Riverside campus who needed abortions to an illegal clinic in West Los Angeles. At that time, it's now West Hollywood, has been incorporated. At that time, it was in Los Angeles. And it was just a little storefront clinic. So Mary told me about it and said, come on over, which I did. And I went there, and as we were talking, Mary said, I have some ideas about this. And as she was talking to me, I went along with her, just kind of automatically, how it is with women. We have some multitasking, we've got a lot of things to do, so we carry on our conversations as we, move around the house or whatever. So she had 5 children. And so between us, we had 11. And so this was just it was a very small clinic. This room is wider than it is. It was about the space of that window and that door, maybe a tad bigger, but it was, a kind of shotgun style. It was the receiving room, and then a series of little rooms, and then a back storage room. So she led me over, and as she walked toward a procedure room, and it was tiny, like maybe from here to there. We're talking just room enough for a gynecological table, actually. And there was a woman who was on the table, and the speculum was in, and a light shining, on her vaginal area. And there I was, face to face with her cervix. I had never seen a cervix. I certainly had not seen my own. Had no idea what it looked like whatsoever. And I'm looking in this really beautiful pink cervix. It just was so simple. Somehow I expected curlicues, or I don't know what I expected. And I thought, gee, and a little bit of not bright, but clear mucus was coming out of the os. And I just felt like I was weak in the knees, because I had been studying this with Lana. I knew that 5,000 women a year were estimated to die of illegal abortion at that time. I knew what a struggle we were all having. And the outrage that I felt that something so simple and so accessible could be hidden from us, it just blew me away. I mean, the anger just welled up in me. I just made all the connections, connected the dots. And so that stayed with me, and of course, on my way home, I saw that there were some plastic speculums, like this, and I took one home with me. And I thought, I wonder if I can see my own cervix. And when the kids were gone and the house was to myself, I just took my time, and it did take me quite a long time, because as it turns out, I have a cervix that can be a little hard to locate, but I did, and there I was. Of course, my cervix was larger than the woman that I had seen because she had never had children. And when one has children, that stretches the cervix, and usually it never goes back to that completely, small size it was. But with 6 children, it was a big cervix. And but other than that, it was just fine. Everything about it was very healthy and normal looking, and just felt very proud of myself, really, to have been able to see it. So Mary suggested at that time, another time to me, she said, Carol, the doctor here, the illegal abortionist, has been arrested and he's on trial. Of course, I knew this, but she said, he's on trial. And he's, all the attention's on him. Why don't we start a clinic? She said, because it's a pretty simple procedure. I've watched him do it a lot of times, and he's invented this equipment that it seems to me that we could learn how to do it pretty easily. And I said, well, yeah, sounds like a good idea to me. Meanwhile, I did at that time, as part of my committee work, organized the first abortion demonstration in Los Angeles, and it was about 500 people that came to Hancock Park for this program. And we had the Fellowship of Felons. More like that. Oh, Fellowship, is that better? Okay. The Fellowship of Felons. And I had the Land of Hope and Glory, I forget what it's called, da da dee da da dee da. That was that. And I said, I read the abortion law, the text of it. And I said, anyone who's had an abortion or has a relationship with someone who had, please step forward and be inducted into the Fellowship of Felons. We played it, and people started coming up. And as they did, not everyone, but many people just broke into tears, myself included. It was just a stirring moment for us to all realize that just to control our own bodies, that we had to be balanced. And we were proud of it. So we got a little group together to learn how to do abortions. Now these were women that kind of there was a lot of publicity that had been generated, and a lot of women had come to the clinic to be in support. And so we had gathered together. And the guy who ran the place, Dr. Harvey Carmen, tolerated our being there. Obviously we were referral sources. So he let us hang out. He didn't particularly help us, but he did tolerate us and let us come and go, and we observed. And then we began to try this with, for example, if we had a friend that was pregnant, and then we said, well, we're learning to do it. If you're willing, why we'll try with you. And then we would wait until the clinic was not occupied. By the way, Dr. Carmen would disappear on us for days or maybe even a week at a time. Kind of a mysterious guy. We never knew where he went. But we found out later. But at the time we didn't know. At any rate, we'd wait till he was gone, and then we would come in and do the abortion, and what do you know, it always worked out great. We were really making great progress. But there was just a few of us. So we said, well, we really need more people. So we put an ad in the local women's newspaper. And lo and behold, about as many women showed up as right here. It was really, big turnout. And everybody wanted to know, what's going on, because we'd been kind of mysterious in our article. So those of us who on the committee, we split up our responsibilities. So I was the person that was delegated to explain the actual procedure. This is what he used. He used a flexible cannula, a little bit thicker than this one. This is a 4 millimeter, and he used like a 6 millimeter. And it was attached to a 50 cc syringe, which when you pull back, developed a suction, and out came the uterine contents, providing you're dealing with a 6 or 8 week pregnancy, or maybe even a little more, but for sure, those easy, it would come out. It might be too much, in which case you would disengage, and then you would put this out in a jar or a container to look at later, and then you would resume and do it again. In addition to this, he had some plastic sticks that he put right here and attached with a rubber band. And when you pulled it open, these sticks would flare out so that they would brace against this. So you couldn't, by accident, force it back in, which the danger would be pushing an air embolism in. So I was explaining this to the women, and I looked at their faces, and they looked like they were going to faint. They were, and I realized, hey, these guys, I knew that at that time, abortion was just this extremely dangerous procedure. And, here we were saying, oh, here's this stuff, it's so easy, we can do it. And I thought they just think we're just being, cavalier. I mean, they're in sympathy, but, they really doubt that this is a viable plan. So I said, well, I'll tell you what, if people will come with me in the other room, I think I'll be good if you were to see, what a woman's genitals look like, or I don't know what words I used. Maybe I said my cervix, who knows. I just said, come in the other room. And so I went into the other room, which, as I say, this was a feminist bookstore, and next door was, in the other room, was a desk about like this one here. But it was empty, thank goodness. And I got up on it and lay down, and I had a speculum there with me. And I said, for my demonstration. And I said, well, come on over. And, to be honest, I had no idea what there would be the reaction. Because, kind of bizarre to see this woman jumping up on a table and spreading her legs. I mean, it wasn't done, really. And, but in fact, people came over and were just extremely interested. That was their main, thing was, wow, look at this, And we started talking about it. Women started sharing their experiences. Then other women volunteered to look at their cervixes, take advantage of this opportunity. And so by the end of the evening, we had seen 3 or 4 cervixes, which was good, because seeing one cervix is just like seeing one nose, It doesn't tell you what, cervixes in general look like. So we were fortunate in being able to see a few. And just in the sharing of information, that evening alone, we just completely destroyed several myths. I mean, for example, I have a retroverted uterus where it kind of leans back. My doctor told me, well, that's why you get pregnant so easily. Well, later in the evening, another woman got up, and what do you know? She had an anteverted uterus, where her uterus, you know, instead of leaning back like mine, it leaned forward. And she said, well, my doctor told me that's why I got pregnant easily. You know, I mean, it just was absurd. And, you know, we saw one woman said, well, I don't know if you want to see this because, you know, I'm on my period. And we said, oh, no, we want to see, you know. So she got up. And, I mean, I think all of us have, you know, been told that somehow we're dirty and smelly because of our menstrual periods and the blood. Well, you know, it turns out that this little trickle of very bright, fresh, you know, blood has absolutely no odor at all. It's only when it's exposed to air that it develops an odor. I mean, just that alone, I just can't tell you, it just lifted this huge weight on people, you know? To realize that, you know, we were not dirty and smelly. You know, not to believe that myth about us. Secretions and discharge, that was a big one. Because, you know, we realized that there was a complete difference between a healthy secretion. The cervix makes secretions normally. And that, in fact, is when we ovulate, we have fertile mucus that comes out. That's the whole function. A discharge, on the other hand, is the sign of something's wrong. A yeast condition, a vaginal infection. And one woman said, you know, she said, I have been douching to get rid of that secretion. She said, and you know, it's made me really itchy and miserable, but I thought there was something wrong with it. You know, so I understand that this is simple information that doctors could have given us, of course, very simply, but they chose not to. They chose to keep it mysterious, chose to hide behind, you know, this cloak of authority. Well, at that particular time, it so happened that, you know, abortion was actually legal in California. It had been legalized in 1967, and this was 1971. However, it wasn't available because doctors wouldn't provide it. You know, had to be a doctor, and they wouldn't do it. But some enterprising doctors had finally decided to do that, and so there was a couple of places where women in the LA area could go. And we realized that the whole point of our clinic was to provide this unmet need, and if we got arrested, so be it. But we decided that if it was available, it just didn't make sense for us to expose ourselves to get arrested on this. And we realized that knowing about our bodies was really more foundational, more fundamental. And we completely switched our emphasis. One of the women that first night was Lorraine Rothman. Now, Lorraine came from Orange County. She had to drive an hour to get to this meeting. And she saw the equipment that I showed, and she realized that from a woman's point of view, it could be improved. For one thing, she was a little bit worried about the kind of danger of it reversing, that those sticks didn't seem quite good enough. Also, she saw that it took a certain amount of manual dexterity that took a lot of practice, and we wanted it to be something that we could all do. So she worked on this and came back the next week. We're talking about 1 week. I mean, that is how powerful this understanding of our bodies can be. That it opens up, women's imagination and their expertise and their skills. And, they just think up things, and Lorraine did. What it is, she invented a device, and this is it.
Do you want me to
Oh,
hold the microphone?
is that better? Oh, I see what you mean, yes. Let's try that, sure. Okay, thank you. Lorraine came with this. It was a prototype. Her first one, of course, didn't work. I mean, it was a plastic bottle, and when you took away the suction, it caved in and stuff. But she said, she worked on it, but she said, the thing about this, by attaching the syringe to a tube and going to a collection jar and then putting another tube in and going to the cannula, it makes it possible, for one thing, for several women to be involved, and it simplifies the procedure. One woman can put in, and as long as you don't touch the sides of the vagina, you're maintaining the sterility. If you start out with a sterile cannula, you maintain it. And then it goes into the jar, and then another woman can do the pumping. So, this woman has her hands free to do that, this woman has her hands free to do that. Mm-hmm. And a third woman can be next to the woman getting the procedure and be explaining to her, what's going on. And using a mirror, she can show her the material coming down the tube, and which greatly enhances the safety of the procedure, because the woman becomes a participant rather than just having something done to her. Because first of all, you can feel, if you don't have anesthesia, which we didn't use anesthesia. By the way, the uterus is very tough, and this is not going to puncture any uterus. But you can feel it touch the back wall. Mm-hmm. The woman can say, well, you're there. She tells you. And so you're not going to puncture her uterus because, she's telling you. Or she may say, well, I'm kind of tired, let's stop for a few minutes. Mostly tired from the speculum being in, because after a while it can get a little uncomfortable. But it puts it in our hands, and we can control it instead of just one person there, doing this. So it revolutionized, absolutely revolutionized the procedure. Margaret Mead saw this. We had the opportunity to do a self-help clinic for Margaret Mead in her apartment in New York. And she said, this is the most important invention of the 20th century for women. And it is. And Lorraine took out a patent. We urged her to do it because we said women never get credit for their work, Whether we make a dime on this, we're going to have it patented, because to show that you, a woman, completely, untrained, not a doctor, whatever. Lorraine, by the way, her husband also, like Mary, her husband was a professor at the Cal State Fullerton University, and Lorraine was his lab assistant. He was the professor, she helped him out in his lab. So she was very familiar with these various, parts. Wonderful husband, by the way, Al Rothman, who was very supportive and helpful to the health center his entire life. And, but he didn't invent it, Lorraine did. Okay, that's. I'm kind of got involved with my story and I didn't advance these. Okay. You notice they're all wearing glasses. And I'll tell you who took the picture. It was Lorraine. And this was in Maine, at the university there in Bangor, Maine. And you may ask, how did these women, run around doing these things without the authorities, getting upset? Well, they got upset. And we knew they probably would, but and that's why we had a sense of urgency. Like, we got to get this message out here because that, the axe is going to fall and we have to get ready for it. So Lorraine and I traveled around the country showing, the Delum and menstrual extraction, and many self-help groups started up and menstrual extraction groups. But at one point, the axe fell. I was arrested. I and another woman named Colleen Wilson, who was a member of our self-help group, for practicing medicine without a license. And this carried a 6-month in prison, or a $500 fine. Oh, excuse me, $1,000. So for somebody who had never been arrested for anything, this was pretty damn scary, especially with 6 kids. I thought, this is, so it kind of was the thing that we focused on for the next 6 weeks. We decided not to, by U.S. Law, you have a right to a speedy trial. But if you don't go, as soon as they want you to, you waive it, and then they can take forever, to get to trial. So we elected to go right to trial, and it took, so we had 6 weeks to prepare our defense. And of course, we had just been around the country, so we had people around the country. And the night after they came to arrest us, I didn't happen to be there, or Colleen. So later we did turn ourselves in, but we fortunately didn't get arrested that night. But we had a card file. And so we called all the women we knew. They came to our health center, which was a 2-story older house. And we, started calling women all around the country. I wasn't there because our group happened to be going out for the evening to learn group massage that night. And by the time we finished massaging each other, we were all these limp pieces of spaghetti, We were so relaxed. We got back to the health center, they said, we've been busted, So naturally we had to get unrelaxed. And, we had 2 women attorneys, and they were both very sweet and nice and knowledgeable, but they, were convinced that we had committed a crime by looking at our own cervix. And we said, we did not commit a crime. We did not practice in medicine without a license. We just couldn't get it through their heads that it was not a crime. But they were for us. I mean, they did a good job, even though they had their own doubts. But our defense committee, which we had a very active defense committee, worked with them hand in glove to keep them focused on, showing that this was not a crime. And I had tremendous support because Colleen did a plea bargaining because she was very shortly to get her teacher's certificate. And that was just not the moment for her to be going to trial. So she plea bargained to fitting a diaphragm, which she later had expunged. So, that's how we dealt with her charge. At any rate, at the end, and by the way, they had a policewoman who, actually she was either a policewoman or she was hired by the police department. I can't say for sure that she was a full-fledged officer. I don't think they had any women, but she was some kind of investigator. She testified that she had come to the clinic and I had offered to give her an abortion. And of course the jury was just, if they had taken a poll right that minute, I would have been convicted. Well, it so happens that I was still working part-time at this time at the Department of Corrections for the California state. So I had been to a conference in Portland the very date that she said this had happened. My supervisor, Jenny, who thought everything that we're doing was great, she's totally supportive. She came in, she's about 5 foot tall, very soft-spoken person, and in the witness chair, it was challenging for her to testify. She brought my personnel records showing that I was out of town because I had to produce my travel records to get the time off. So she was our witness. So that completely knocked out the testimony of this fake. For those who are not yet totally understanding of how the police lie, well, so they acquitted me, and the juror, the head juror, sent me a card and it said, "Carol, you're not a downer, you're an upper." So this really, ended up getting national attention, a lot more people wanting us to come, and as we have found, and I want to say this to any group that gets going and goes into the little gray area, that attacks, if you overcome them, if you meet them and you work against them, promote you, not the reverse. I'm not saying going out and asking for attacks, obviously, but be willing to take a risk. Realize that if you are solidly grounded in what you're doing, and if it was really something that the average person would, support, and it was good, and you do go through it, it will help you, not hinder you. I think that's something that we need to keep in mind as we are weighing those things. I'm just going to go through these very quickly. That was the charge with practicing a medical license. And then here's the next thing, right on the heels of this, a couple of months later, was the Roe v. Wade decision. And I think it's noteworthy that menstrual extraction is mentioned in this landmark decision. It's right here, menstrual extraction. See if we're there. They noticed. They were aware that women were onto this. So why not give us the right quick before we want it on our own right? That, who knows? If they had not have put out Roe v. Wade, abortion might be legal everywhere in the world today. Truly, because if once women spread this, because we were on a roll, we were really spreading menstrual extraction very fast. But of course, once Roe v. Wade was determined, why everybody relaxed and, you know, stopped doing that. Well, since Roe v. Wade was passed, that meant that we could open up an abortion clinic. And of course, the law said we had to have a doctor, so we did. But it was women controlled, and we provided abortions in our own clinic. And this is so much more important. I got to tell you that a lot of times, a lot of feminists think, well, our real goal is to get abortion mainline. We want you to be able to just call a doctor and say, I need an abortion. Oh, okay, come in next Tuesday. And just go in and it just be an ordinary procedure. I mean, that's what our goal is. That is not our goal. I mean, maybe, 10, 20 years after having, women-controlled clinics everywhere, that might be possible. But actually, even today, and in fact it's gone backwards, is that this equipment, this flexible cannula, now this is only 4 millimeters. It's what we use for menstrual extraction, because most women, during their menstrual period, their cervical os is already open at least that much. So it's not painful. They don't need anesthesia. But in abortion, 90% of the pain of abortion comes from the expanding the cervix. And they insist, these doctors insist on having big cannulas. They want a 10 millimeter, they want a 12, some even a 14. That way they, instead of taking 3 minutes for the procedure, they can only take 2 minutes. You see, it matters to them. They don't care how long you wait in the waiting room, but when they get in there and do it, they want, seconds count. They just want to speed it up. So right now, most of the care I'm aware of that is given of abortion is below par. That is standard procedure in medical clinics to use the larger cannulas. And you can check them and ask what size cannulas do they use. That's just one aspect of it. But the information provided is always in a very paternalistic way. It's always very judgmental. And it is nothing like feminists provide to each other. That is mostly informational based. It's not wagging your finger and say, we don't want to see you in here again, type of treatment. Alrighty, here we are showing you self-examination. And this is something that we offer at all of our clinics. And we do go out to the community and to homes and to presentations. And this was at our clinic. This was a participatory clinic. And in that, the lay health workers provided the care. And we scheduled women in, according to the problem, like vaginal infection, schedule them in groups. So not only did they get to see each other's cervixes, and this is of course with their full permission, of course, in advance, but they also could see other women that had the same problem and things that had worked for one person, to share tips. When they left, they knew more about vaginal infections than the average doctor. Yeah. Well, I got arrested again. This is me, and this is Janice Cohen. And this is in Tallahassee, Florida. And we had inspected a maternity ward because of the practices. We were protesting them. And we had walked through, we didn't go into an actual nursery, but we did go into the maternity ward, and they came out the next morning, and we were at a conference, and we had gone in a bus to go to a surprise inspection. And they didn't like that, so they arrested us. And in this case, I was convicted. However, it was a very unfair trial. Al Rothman, that I mentioned before, he came and testified that as a biologist, a professor of biology, that nothing we had done would endanger, the baby. And when the judge, who made really totally unfair rulings throughout, when he came to give us the verdict, there were police dogs there because the room was crowded with about 300 people. And he wanted to make sure that there would be no, disturbances. I had police dogs. Anyway, it was overturned on appeal, but I did spend a couple of days in the Leon County Jail and meeting other women, and although it was no fun, I did learn a lot, and it, taught me how things are from the other side. I'm just going to go through and say one word about this slide, and that is that today, most women are taking very unsafe methods of birth control. These are the birth control pill, which people now call birth control, or IUDs. And there is a number of other equally effective and far safer methods, but it's very hard to find them. Clinics don't stock them. Diaphragms, condoms, cervical cap. This particular cap is not available because the manufacturer stopped manufacturing it. But there's other cervical caps, FemCap, and so it's not necessary to risk your life or constant depression just to avoid pregnancy. But we are being forced into that by the medical profession and the people who are a movement to fight population control people, which I'll talk more about later. We wrote a book, and Suzanne Gage did the drawings for this. Beautiful, beautiful drawings. And it basically brought together all of our information from running women-controlled clinics and our research into female sexuality. How to stay out of the gynecologist's office, put in all the home remedies, things that we learned in our clinic. Women-centered pregnancy. Some women used self-help and self-exam to be lay midwives, Menopause myths and facts. It's, we exploded the myth of all these hormones that they give women, which first of all are not really that effective and dangerous on top of it, and other things that can be done that are equally effective. Okay, what we found was that the full extent of the female sex organ has been completely hidden. And that is right as of this very moment. You cannot find an anatomy book that contains the complete female organ. However, as of 1848, it was known, the full extent. There were papers, anatomists had done, very reputable anatomists had established that we had, not only did we have a uterus and vagina, but we also had a clitoris. And that this consisted of not only rectal tissue, which is basically all the popular magazines have gotten in here. Yeah, this is in Cosmopolitan. This purports to be the latest. Well, it's not the latest. This is at least 40 years after we found this out, plus a lot more. This is just one little aspect of what we learned, and they're palming it off as being this big revolutionary thing, of the fact that there's more rectal tissue. Well, there is. There's a hell of a lot more rectal tissue than what they do. But what is still not in, and I've got a copy for people to see here of the Gray's Anatomy latest anatomy books. And you will see that although it contains some additional information, it still does not acknowledge female ejaculation. It does not talk about the urethral sponge, which is around the urethra. In fact, if you want to see that, you have to go to the section in the urinary system. It's a whole different part of the book. If you want to see the muscles, you've got to go into the muscles section of the book. Yeah, they've taken our actual anatomy and split it up, not recognizing its actual function, which is to get erect and to lubricate and then to gather together the, during excitement, get erection and gather together the ejaculatory fluid, and then bang, all the contractions of all the muscles get together, make the contraction, and the, fluid's ejected. Very similar. Doesn't it sound a lot like what happens to men? Well, they explain that in great detail. Now, that's not just because they favor men, although they do, of course. That's a given. But the main reason that they do it is because they have to. Because all of those functions are reproductive. That's a man's reproduction. All of those actions. But with the female, it isn't. You don't have to have an orgasm to get pregnant. Tell me. I had 6 children. So that is why they get the full treatment. But if you read their description, if you look in the Terminologia Anatomica, which we have, which is the international list of biological terms, you will find all of the parts that I'm referring to. Here again, it's separated out a little bit. Not as much, but it is separated out. But it's right there. And, well, let's see, I lost my beginning. Where did I start? Anyway, the point is they are still, this minute, hiding. I mean, anyone who says, oh, women who have come so far, well, that is so far from the truth. That we're out taking the pill. We don't know what's going on with our bodies. We are putting in, dealing with that, going to a doctor to deal with vaginal conditions that are very simple to deal with home remedy. Granted, there is some advance in that on a kind of almost underground basis, but yes, we are improving. But, if you go to the doctor, you're still going to just be being given drugs and surgery and a lecture on top of it. There. So let's look at what we found out about this. We took pictures of a woman masturbating, and this is the under the tissues. Suzanne Gage did these. And it shows in this, I'm going to show you one that's with the tissues all over, the overlay. But let's see here. This is the clitoral bulb. This is what a lot of us were brought up thinking was it. And then they acknowledged that, yes, Masters and Johnson revealed that there was the legs. And Masters and Johnson even mentioned that there were these bulbs. But they called them the vestibular bulbs, which means like the entrance. And they called it the orgasmic platform. They didn't really get it, that it was actually part of this organ. They never quite got that. This is the urethra, and you can see these side view of these tissues. The urethra is lined with more of this lateral tissue, which is with the vagina. It kind of overlays the vagina, which is why a lot of women genuinely feel like they have vaginal orgasms, because that's where they get the most feeling. But it's still the clitoris is doing it. It's still, even though it's felt in the vagina. And okay, next. Okay. All right. She's stimulating. For some reason, I'm not seeing that. Okay, orgasm. She is having an orgasm. Here it is, fast and furious. And here are the muscles that I was referring to. These are the underlying muscles around the anus, around the vagina, and drawing together. And, you know, as the man who did the original anatomical drawings in the 1800s noted, through this, he was, of course, he was a man and looking at it from a male point of view, but he was not a misogynist or a sexist. And he noted that actually with these muscles, that it didn't matter the size of the opening. In other words, you know, how many kids you had. This tight vagina is just another one of those myths that because of this feature, it doesn't matter the size of the penis. Every woman's vagina is set up for that, to accommodate to the size of the penis. So, you know, this means that, you know, we don't have to go around feeling like because we had kids or something, you know, we're not somehow able to give satisfaction when you're heterosexual. All right, now she gets resolution. The blood has been pushed out, and she's back where she started. Okay. Why isn't this advancing?
I think she's about to have an orgasm again.
I'm going back.
There you go.
Well, I'm sure she wouldn't object, but okay. Oh, these are with the tissue over. Okay, it's the same sequence, but there. See, she's having her orgasm. Now, this is a tip for the guys. I think we're actually female lovers too. If you want to know if a woman's really having an orgasm, it's very visible. It's not, you know, we change. There, it's there. And so it takes one more little dodge out of our, I guess, but we gain because we learn about our bodies. So, happiness is knowing your own cervix. That is the end of the slideshow. But I'm going to switch gears. But it didn't, yeah, you come ahead and pass it out. Yeah. It's not really switching gears. Because remember I said that once you get an overall political understanding of your body, a lot of things become much clearer to you in life. You can read the newspapers differently, the news, you process things differently. You're in a different world, pre and post. And I can't emphasize that enough, is that the significance of knowing about your body just cannot be underestimated. Now, what I'm handing out here is a paper that we discovered in the early 70s, but this was actually published in 1969. This was put out by Planned Parenthood World Population. And I just have to say very quickly that Planned Parenthood or planning familiar or family planning, whatever the names it goes by in the various countries, is not a feminist organization. It may be one that we may want to support because it's the only game in town a lot of times, but we have to see its fact that its agenda is much bigger than giving women rights. And we may not agree with that agenda. In fact, I violently, well, not violently, but extremely disagree with the racist and classist thing that's been going on for the last 40 years, really, of spreading these dangerous methods of birth control, not only here in this country, but in the global south, to combat population explosion, supposedly. And I want us to look at it differently because, granted, there was a rise in population, but it was primarily in the countries of color, not in the white countries. They were going down, actually. The birth rate had already started going down amongst middle-class white women 100 years before, and they've been working on it for that period of time. That's been a big problem to the West, you know, the corporations and industrial people that frankly want to stay in charge of the globe. And they want, how do you do that? You do it by maintaining your white culture. And how do you maintain your culture? Is by your babies. And of course, the more liberal, I mean, because I want you to know that it isn't just conservatives now we're talking about. We're not just talking about right-wing people. We're talking about left-wing people too. We're talking about people, environmentalists, for example, who have somehow convinced women to not have babies so they can save the environment. Well, we definitely need to save the environment by stop consuming in the way that we do. But we may or may not, it's an open question as to how much of the people we have to eliminate. I mean, I'm not at this moment, that hasn't been studied. But we have to realize that there is this very entrenched, powerful segment of, you know, these industrialists and corporations and people that have the power in our society, in our white controlled society, to promote these population control programs. But it's of course, it's not unanimous. There are people, like, for example, Donald Trump in the United States wants to, and a lot of legislators want to, change the law, take away Roe v. Wade, or at least reinterpret it. And those people are pronatalists. Now, pronatalism has been the policies of most countries throughout history. I mean, in the past, it's always been good to have more babies. And so there's been, all of them have done that. But there was a way of dealing with too many babies in the past. And this is a guy named Malthus. And he put out his book in 1800. And he said that, of course, he didn't think about women's participation in this whatsoever. He just noticed that whenever a society produced enough food and was doing well, the population would go up. Well, the problem from Malthus's point of view, was that as the population went up, you'd run out of food because the population increases geometrically, and the food only increases arithmetically, So Malthus said, that's okay, because, he didn't say it was great, but he just said, we don't have to worry about overpopulation. He didn't even talk about that, because disease and famine would take care of that. We had disease and famine. That would do it. So this was Malthus's theory. And that's why he opposed welfare or poor laws. He said, you're just making the problem worse. You just get more people, and then there's just more famine and more disease. So, best to just, not give out any welfare and let nature take its course, basically. Well, there were people who didn't agree with that, and they were on the liberal side, and they were our quote-unquote friends, like John Stuart Mill, other kinds of people. And they said, no. What we need to do is to make birth control available. See, Malthus was a minister, and he opposed birth control morally. It was immoral. But they said, no, we should get out birth control and limit the population that way so that we wouldn't have overpopulation. So they started, and they, gained speed up and around the turn of the century, the 20th century. And Margaret Sanger, came along and promoted birth control. And eugenicists, by the way, which were also very concerned with maintaining white male supremacy. And I don't have time for this now, but there is a very rich history of very high up people in all of the white-dominated country promoting these programs and very openly talking about preventing race suicide, Teddy Roosevelt included, very high up people. So that's Malthus. These other people we call neo-Malthusians, because they believe in birth control. Now, what I want to present tonight, and I wish I had a lot more time, but this little chart is going to help me, is that the neo-Malthusians are still around, and they're still doing what they do, Planned Parenthood being one of them. But there is a new approach, and it's called neoliberalism. And I think we're all aware of neoliberalism being, cutting back, individualism, lower taxes for the rich, deregulation, and so forth. Now, I think it's clear that these things are not good for us, the majority of people, economically. What I want to educate us tonight about is that this has everything to do with women and our reproduction. This is a very important aspect of neoliberalism that is not talked about, because this is basically a revival of Malthus. Keep people, precarious, keep them on a starvation diet, keep them working part-time and piecing things together. Take away scholarships. You'll see it on this master plan in the second row over at the bottom. You'll see all of these very measures, and this is written 10 years before Reagan and Thatcher came along, that you know, they knew this would make women have fewer children because, as I say, they never put us in the equation, but they just kind of think that we mindlessly, I guess, you know, respond to it not, you know, not being as fertile. It's like a bunch of sheep out on a pasture. You know, if there's not quite enough grass growing on the pasture, they won't have as many little sheep. Well, it isn't that at all. It's that women have always, throughout history, have thought about the babies that they're going to have and that have been concerned that that child have a chance to survive. And if they have the knowledge, which they did before the witch hunts in the 13th century, which destroyed women's knowledge about our bodies, they would take herbs to prevent that. In fact, there was one herb in the medieval times that was so good at it that it became extinct. So many people harvested it that that plant ceased to exist because it was such an efficient abortifacient and so popular. But as they say, the witch hunts, it was the first population control experiment. It took 4 centuries of burning maybe 100,000 women and some men to make us all be as ignorant as we are today. You know, this is not, don't look back and say in the old days. The old days and the new days is what's not good. We have been alienated from our body. We are walking around without knowledge, and that has nothing to do with women of the past, especially other countries. I mean, witch hunts were in Europe, but the same people who sponsored the witch hunts went around the world into these, you know, conquered countries. And who were the first people? And they took the priest or the minister with them. And who were the first people they targeted? The healthcare providers, male and female. You know, they practically wiped out that knowledge. They didn't do it quite as effectively as in the U.S. and the West, but it made everybody. Anyway, this neoliberalism is the danger today. I realize that all of us are aware of its general effects, but I think when we realize how much it is impacting us, you know, Margaret Thatcher, they interviewed her and she said, you know, it's not just an economic policy. It's about changing the soul. And they have. Labor unions have been destroyed because of lack of social solidarity. You know, group actions, the women's movement itself. I mean, like now in the U.S., most groups, most chapters meet monthly by online. They don't even get together for monthly meetings. That's how separated we've been from each other. And everybody's got their little hustle, you know? We're all entrepreneurs. We're all trying to make it by, you know, doing some extra thing to increase our income and taking little parts of this thing and setting ourselves as little authorities, you know, to help women deal with their health problems as a little business. You know, the actual collectivity of the women's movement has, with the exception of this wonderful organization, you know, the Rape Relief, which has kept this idea of collectivity going and demonstrated its power. I could talk for an hour more, but we don't have the time. We need to open it for questions.
when you're doing a menstrual extraction. Once you start the vacuum, when you're done, how do you break the suction without hurting the woman?
All right. The equipment that's used in hospitals or clinics, most times is a machine, and it creates quite a powerful suction. There are handheld manual aspiration devices, which sometimes they use, but primarily it's a machine. But Lorraine designed this so that you can never have that much suction, so it doesn't cause any pain at all. But it's because it's controlled. With a bigger machine, yeah, you can get some powerful suction, but not in this.
Why, in your opinion, is an IUD dangerous or bad?
Why is it injurious?
Dangerous
Dangerous.
or bad?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, the actual insertion and taking it out has one element of risk, but the primary risk is that they don't even know how it works. They just know that it gets in there and makes your body not able to function normally. So the risks are actually indeterminate. I can't tell you how extensive, but I can tell you some of the known risks is nowadays they attach a hormone to them. And so you're not only getting the interruptive, disturbing influence of the device, but you're also getting a constant stream of hormones. And if you develop side effects from that, you may or may not realize what's going on because it's, become part of your daily experience, and then you don't always sort it out. So, and it's, you have to go in and make an appointment and go through quite a hassle to get it removed. So it just, in general, makes whatever side effects it's going to cause more to deal with, and it just plain old has the same effects of all hormones. And I want to say an additional thing is that I went to a meeting in Las Vegas a couple of years ago of parents of women who had died from using the Nuva ring, which is, a very up-and-coming, popular method of birth control. All their daughters had died. And we went around the room and talked about what had happened. Now, their daughters, with the exception of one woman, most of their daughters were, in their 20s or 30s. They had left home. They weren't living at home or anything, but they developed symptoms that were so serious that, their parents knew about it. And they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Oh, that's not a problem." I mean, these women were throwing up for days on end. I mean, they couldn't hold anything down. Some of them, their legs were, swollen to the point where they couldn't get their shoes or socks on. I mean, they were having very visible problems with this Nuva ring. But their doctors passed it off. None of them got care because of their gynecologists, and I'm sure the Nuva ring is an expensive form of birth control. These were all affluent people, by the way. These were a very affluent group of people whose daughters had died from this. So, in addition to the dangers that these methods cause, you have to add, and then when something goes wrong, you may not get the care. It may not be recognized or dealt with until, you've died. And as rare as these complications may seem when you see them statistically, when it happens to you or your daughter, it's very real.
With the increasing restriction of women's access to abortion in the U.S.,
Are you seeing, or are you aware of like a resurgence in women's self-help groups popping up?
Yes, there is quite a bit of discussion about this. I myself have attended several meetings of women in the LA area, just to talk about what to do. And there have been different decisions. One particular group decided to learn menstrual extraction. There's a number of women around the country who, some I know of and some I only hear about, and so who knows how many there are in total, that are learning this as I have described it. However, more numerous than that, there are a number of women that are learning to use the handheld device as individuals, and they are offering it as a service. Right this minute, most of the people they are offering it as a service are, women who would prefer to go a private, they're not doing it. They could get a legal abortion if they wanted, but they prefer to do it in a home situation or, whatever. But were the law to be changed, these women envision doing that. I'm kind of concerned about it, to be honest, because doing it in a way that they are, and I've shared this with people, I've had discussions with women who are doing this, and as I tell them, look, when we do it in self-help, there's at least the members of our group, at the very minimum. There's 8 or 10 or 20 women. And so that's 8 or 10 or 20 uteruses that we've been able to do exams on, because the length of pregnancy is vital. If you get into a pregnancy that's more advanced, you need different equipment. Not that it's dangerous. It's not going to kill you to get into it, but you'll have to go to a hospital to get it completed. And once you go to get it completed, then they're going to question you, and you may find yourself under arrest. And once the person is under arrest, then everybody connected is under arrest. So it's really important skill. And, but that is happening. And I think the pill, however, is the more likely thing to happen, is that the abortion pill is being distributed. But, a woman, Purvi Patel, was arrested, and she was actually tried and sentenced to 20 years in prison, although it was fortunately commuted, but to a much shorter time. I think she was only in prison a year or something. Problem with Purvi was that she was way too far along for the pills to be effective. So she did pass the fetus. But by this time, it was like a 20-week fetus or 22 weeks. They tried to maintain that it was breathing, and so it was escalated to a murder charge, etc. It's going to be messy. Let's put it that way. There's going to be it's going to be a lot of women that misgauge, a lot of women that are without a support system. I think what needs to happen is that there needs to be organized women working together to start up counseling, because these are things that these women should have a number to call, somebody to say, hey, I'm bleeding. Is it that's how the abortion happens, is that you bleed, and of course that's going to cause pain. So how much pain? How much bleeding? How fast? That's where a counselor comes in, and they can say, this is within the range, or no, you better go seek out, medical help, and here's what you can say to them so that they will not realize that you've taken the pill. You know, there's just all these helpful things that a counselor can tell them. But at the moment, it's anybody's guess, really.
I'll ask a question. Carol, in your opinion then, what's the safest method of birth control besides not having sex with men?
I think in today, you're talking about the safest method, and you're including that you can get backup of an early abortion?
Yeah.
Because I think as long as abortion is legal, any of the methods are safer. Any. Whether that's foam that you buy at the drugstore, or condoms, or female condom, or cervical caps, fertility awareness, all of those are safer than the pill. Using early abortion as your backup. And I'm not just pulling that out of the air. Dr. Christopher Tisi did a survey, and this was a long time ago, but it's the same equations, and he found that to be true. That these topical methods with backup abortion is by far the safest way to avoid pregnancy.
Sister.